Hey YouTube, Twig here, bringing you all my Geargia Yugioh deck profile for November 2019. Been wanting to do a Geargia update for a long while now, and finally, after getting the new support from my buddy Jim's Yu-Gi-Oh collection that I traded off of him, was finally able to create the updated Geargia deck for the most recent Link format. I don't even think I've made a Geargia deck for Link format since we started with all the different Link monsters, but it's a really fun deck. The whole point of the deck is to use the machine Geargia monsters and the Geargiano monsters to go for different Exceed summons, and we can also now use Link summons with the Geargia monsters to have a bunch of different plays for consistency with the different levels with the Geargias, and also the different flip effects we can get from cards like Geargia Armor, Geargia Anchor, and etc. So let's go ahead and get started with the deck profile. So to start off, for the monsters, I run 3 Geargia Armor. Once per turn, you can change this card to face down defense position, and when this card is flip face up, you can add 1 Geargia monster from your deck to your hand, except Geargia Armor. So this is your search card, which you can rely on. Very, very useful for that search. The one card I don't run in the deck is Geargia Yugioh, just because it was a normal summon add. There is a spot in the deck that you can replace for Geargia Yugioh if you do want to run the card. I just like Geargia Armor. For the flip, works very consistently with the other Geargia monsters I run, and it's very easy to special summon out all the different Geargia monsters. So relying on Geargia Armor for that search, and just with its defense, being able to take a good amount of monster attacks definitely does help and come in handy also when you flip it up. I also run from the original Geargia monsters 3 Geargia Accelerator. If you control a Geargia monster, you can special summon this card from your hand in defense position, and when this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, you can target 1 Geargia monster in your graveyard, except Geargia Accelerator, add that target to your hand. So the recycle power of this card is one of the only Geargia monsters that doesn't have the flip effect, but it still helps just with the consistent special summoning you can do with Geargia Accelerator, and then go for the overlay depending on all the different Geargia monsters you run in the deck for your different Exceed plays, with one of the main ones being Geargia X, which has the search and special summon power for the whole Geargia deck, and also just being a machine monster card to rely on basically also for that overlay. So 3 Geargia Accelerator also definitely does come in handy. And keeping to the original Geargia monsters, I run 3 Geargia Arsenal. This card gains 200 attack for each Geargia monster you control. You contribute this card to special summon 1 Geargia monster from your deck in defense position, except Geargia Arsenal. So not only does it help by setting up Geargia Arsenal in your graveyard for special summon plays with other spell and traps we run in the deck, but it also gives you the option to search out a good wide variety of the different Geargia monsters we run in the deck. That's why I like to run 3, because not only can it gain a good amount of attack if you swarm the field with a bunch of different Geargia monsters, but then you also have the option for that special summon to get one on the field and then use its own effect, let's say like Geargia Armor for example, out onto the field, and then flip it face down to have its search effect, or all the other destruction effects that some of the other Geargia monsters share. Some of them being Geargia Attacker. Now I have 3 Geargia Attacker in the deck. I was debating on the ratio I wanted for Geargia Attacker and Geargia Anchor. You could try 2 Attacker and 2 Anchor, but I have the 3 Attacker just because most of the decks I go up against do run a pretty good number of back row. So it all comes down to the preference of whether or not you wanted to destroy more back row with your Geargia deck, or if you wanted to go for more monster destruction like Geargia Anchor can do. But once per turn, you can change this card to face down defense position. When this card is flipped face up, you can destroy any number of spell trap cards on the field up to the number of other Geargia monsters you control. So just having a wide variety of different Geargia monsters, and we have a certain spell, which we'll get to when we get over to the spells, that helps just get out a bunch of different Geargia monsters for that play, and then you're able to flip them face down for those effects also. So 3 Geargia Attacker is just the preference I prefer, but I have the 1 Geargia Anchor, which you can adjust the number of Anchor in the deck by reducing the number of Geargia Attackers, just like I said. Once per turn, you can change this card to face down defense, and if this card is flip face up, you can destroy any number on the field of monsters up to the number of other Geargia monsters you currently control. So having this in Attacker can help just to clear all the different spells and monsters your opponent may have on the field for the destroy aspect, going for monsters or spells, with these 2 cards being some of your more offensive ones. Then cards like Geargia Accelerator and Geargia Armor help to special summon and just give you more and more Geargia resources to rely on. And then for the Geargia monsters, I run 3 Geargia MK2. When this card is normal or flip summon, you can special summon 1 Geargia monster from your hand or graveyard in defense position. So it just gives you resources, and what's great now in Link format is that we have level 3s and 4s, but Link monsters can still help for the different plays you can use to summon out those monsters. So even if you don't have monsters of the same level to go for an Exceed play, you can still go for the Link play, which can be just as useful or even just help to bump up some of your cards power-wise. With all the Geargia monsters being Earth, going into cards like Mrs. Radiant can definitely come in handy for those plays, and I say Geargia MK2 is definitely one of the best Geargia monsters we have in the deck, which is why I like to run 3 of it, because it just gives you more and more resources each turn to use, or just give you other Geargia monsters back onto the field to use for some of your other plays. And then for the other Geargia monsters, I run 1 Geargia and 1 Geargia MK3. With Geargia, you contribute this card to target 1 level 4 machine monster in your graveyard. Special summon it from the graveyard, but its effects are negated. So it kind of, minuses yourself from this one card for another one on the field. So I don't like it as much. I run it mostly also for the Geargia Gear target with this card. And Geargia MK3, same when it's special summoned with Geargia Gear. When this card is special summoned by the effect of a Geargia card, or you can even use Geargia Arsenal to summon it. You can special summon 1 Geargia monster from your hand or graveyard in defense position except Geargia MK3, but its effects are negated. You can only use this effect of Geargia MK3 once per turn. You cannot special summon monsters the turn you activate this effect except Geargia monsters. So I like to rely mostly with Geargia Gear for this card, since if you activate at the end of your opponent's turn, you're not limited to the restriction after having all those monsters out on the field. And just more and more targets to use with cards like Geargia MK2, giving you more and more cards for the resources, and the fact that Geargia Gear bumps up their levels gives you access to the rank 4 plays you can do most of the time, and going into bigger cards like Gear Gigant X as well. And then lastly, I run the 3 Goblinberg. Now this can be Geargia Yugioh if you wanted to fill in this last spot with the card that gives you the additional search for cards in your deck, but it has to be with a normal summon, which is why I don't like it as much of cards like Geargia Armor, which you can special summon out and then flip face down and rely on the search play. But cards like Goblinberg, or if you want to try out Tin Goldfish instead for the machine monster for the overlay, this just another easy card, being an Earth monster also, to swarm cards out on the field to use for this final spot. It's why I preferred that over it, just being in Link format and wanting more and more monsters to special summon out faster. This card helps with that play, which is why I wanted this final spot to be Goblinberg and not Geargia Yugioh, since I feel you can make the deck run a lot faster and have plenty of other searches with some of the other cards that we run in the deck. One of them being, when we move on to the spells now, is Ties to the Brethren. You pay 2,000 life points, then target 1 level 4 or lower monster you control for the rest of this turn after this card resolves. You cannot special summon monsters, also special summon 2 monsters from your deck with the same type and attribute and level as that monster, but with different names from each other and that monster. You cannot conduct your battle phase the turn you activate this card, but for all the resources, if you have Geargia Armor, and then you can summon out with the card any access Geargia Accelerator, Geargia Arsenal. Most of the time I like to go for Attacker and Anchor, giving you all 3 of the flip effects on the field to use, and then you can flip them face down and then have that pressure on your opponent depending on what they attack into, also with these cards. And knowing still that if you use one of the Ties of the Brethren, you still have the other 2, which can very much be active with the Geargia monsters in the deck, and just the additional level 4 Geargia monsters, having plenty of targets to go for, and not just a card that you use once and then all the resources are used up. So I like to run this card, and you really don't use your life for anything else in the deck also, so very, very useful there. Running a good amount of machine monsters, I also run 2 limiter removal, just a good way to bump up the monster's attack for some of your bigger plays for when they're attacking, and then you can always just use them for a Link play or Exceed summon with them to get them off the field before they would be destroyed. Another thought I tried out was if you want to remove one of the limiter removals and put in a double or nothing, because we do run Utopia and Utopia the Lightning in the extra deck also, can help for those plays, just giving you the search for double or nothing for one of your finisher plays with Utopia the Lightning. I also run the 1 Scapegoat. This helps because we do run Mrs. Radiant, so if you activate Scapegoat at the end of your opponent's turn, you can make 2 Mrs. Radiant, which can easily power up the different Geargia monsters you have on the field, making a stronger Geargia Armor in defense mode, especially when it's flip face up, or vice versa for all the other ones like Geargia Attacker and Geargia Anchor also. So just the Scapegoat helps for the defensive plays, but it can also set up a lot of your other plays in the deck too. And also the 1 Monster Reborn, more resources from the graveyard to special summon out to the field, so definitely useful when I'm 1 monster short for those Exceed plays. And that is it for the spells. We'll now move on to the traps. I run 3 Geargia Gear, probably one of the best traps in the whole deck. You special summon 2 Geargiano monsters from your deck and increase their levels by 1. You can activate 1 Geargia Gear per turn. This card just gives you your play, going for any of the Geargiano monsters we play, giving them for the rank 4. It's a once per turn, but nothing else happens to the cards except their level being raised. There's no shuffle back, there's no destruction. You have those monsters to work with, so if you activate this at the end of your opponent's turn, you get those monsters to use for those resources, and we have plenty of Geargiano monsters for the additional ones in the deck to go for. So I definitely like that it's at 3. I remember it was, I think, either limited or semi-limited at one point for the deck, but definitely does help for the overall power the deck can do. And I also run 3 Trap Trick. This is just more setup for the normal trap, which is Geargia Gear in the deck, being able to search it out. I have other normal trap options in the deck also to get a search for this card, but I just like it for the setup. It's just an easier, quicker search for Geargia Gear when you need it, so very, very useful to rely on that in the deck also. And same, just 2 back to the front. It's another search target if you need it for Trap Trick, and just being another easy special summon for your resources from the graveyard along with Monster Reborn. And also 2 Crackdown, just a great way to take care of your opponent's pesky monsters that would either be a problem for your Geargia monsters or just something that you can use for your own plays. And lastly, 2 Stormy Mirror Force, more protection against your opponent using this card. You can try out other cards like the regular Mirror Force or Drowning Mirror Force, but I really do like Storming, being able to bounce back cards to your opponent's hand where they won't be able to use them as well, especially if they're extra deck monsters. And that is it for the main deck. We'll now move on to the extra deck. I run 2 Geargia X, one of your main Exceed monsters to go into. It needs 2 level 4 machine type monsters. Once per turn, you can detach 1 Exceed material from this card to add 1 level 4 or lower machine type monster from your deck or graveyard to your hand. And when this card leaves the field, you can target 1 level 3 or lower Geargia monster in your graveyard and special summon that target. So just more resources to rely on, especially in this deck of all decks, since it has the Geargia effect also to use for your lower level Geargia monsters. But the search effect just adds to the consistency, but that special summon is an added bonus that only this deck can fully utilize. I also run 1 Geargia Gear Gigant XG for the consistency with the level 3 Geargia monsters being able to negate your opponent's cards, and also having another card just to recycle other ones back to your hand. And then for the generic Exceeds, I run 1 Castel, the Sky Blaster Musketeer, 1 Gaga Cowboy, 1 number 39 Utopia, and 1 Utopia the Lightning, 1 Tornado Dragon, 1 Abyss Dweller for all the Exceed monsters. And for the Link monsters, I have the 2 Mrs. Radiant just for the power play, which we discussed before, the 1 Nightmare Phoenix, the 1 Nightmare Unicorn, 1 Triple Burst Dragon, and the 1 Boral Sword Dragon. This can even be Boral Load depending on the play you might have wanted to go for. But that is it for the deck profile. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Definitely happy to finally release the Geargia deck. I've been wanting to do one for a while, but now that the deck finally landed at my fingertips with the recent collection I picked up, was finally able to make it a reality. But until next time, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and Kira Twig out.